Looking back now, I realize how naive I was in 2018. I thought I knew what exhaustion felt like. I thought I understood stress. I was 22, a psychology major pushing through my senior thesis while juggling shifts at a coffee shop on Capitol Hill, and fielding constant calls from my parents about graduate school applications. My friends liked to joke that I lived on caffeine and guilt, but the truth was I had been burning at both ends for so long, I didn't even notice anymore. That October, right when storm season was in full swing, my dad's old friend, Daniel Mercer, offered me a lifeline. Daniel was the kind of man who collected hobbies, rock climbing, trail running, you name it. He was planning a week-long hiking trip in the Cascades and said I could stay at his place while he was gone. "It's peaceful out there," he told me over the phone. "Quiet. You'll finally get some rest." At the time, that sounded like heaven. My apartment was a shoebox with paper-thin walls. Peace wasn't something I got much of, and Daniel's rental on Rainier Avenue felt like a gift. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked like something out of a home magazine. Craftsman style, freshly painted, big windows facing the street. Inside, though, it was oddly bare. No photos, no clutter, no books left on shelves. Just clean wood floors, a modern sofa, a kitchen with shining countertops, and the hum of something faint in the background. That hum turned out to be his security system. Daniel was one of those tech guys who trusted cameras more than locks. Every room had one, tiny black domes in the corners with a panel upstairs showing live feeds. "It'll make you feel safer," he said, smiling when he handed me the keys. "This neighborhood's fine, but hey, you never know." I laughed it off at first. "Feels more like Big Brother than a vacation house," I told him, and he chuckled. But later that first night, sitting alone with rain hammering the windows, I caught myself staring at the screens too long. Every creak in the house had me glancing up, checking the feed. I remember standing in the kitchen making tea around midnight, thunder rolling in the distance, when I noticed the back porch door cracked open. Just a sliver, enough to let in the storm. My stomach dropped. I was sure I had locked it when I came in. I pulled it shut, twisted the deadbolt twice, and told myself it was the wind. I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the storm pressing against the walls and the memory of that open door echoing in my mind. By the third night, I was already on edge, and that's when things started to unravel. The rain that night felt heavier than usual, like buckets being dumped from the sky. The gutters rattled and the big pine in the backyard groaned against the wind. I had been sketching upstairs, half-hearted doodles in my notebook, when the power flickered. Just for a second, but enough to make me stop breathing. When it came back on, I found myself staring at the monitor panel. All the rooms were empty, living room, kitchen, hallways, until I noticed something small. The hallway closet door, the one I had passed earlier, was ajar. I distinctly remembered shutting it. I leaned closer to the screen, my pen sliding off the desk, unnoticed. For a moment, I tried to convince myself it was just the draft from the storm. Then the camera flickered. The feed glitched for less than a second, but when it came back, a shadow had shifted. Someone was there. A tall figure stepped into the hall, moving slow, almost deliberate. My chest tightened as the figure lifted its head and stared directly into the lens. Not around the room. Not at the door. Straight at the camera, like they knew I was watching. I don't remember breathing. I don't even remember moving, only the sound of my elbow hitting the desk and knocking a stapler to the floor with a clang. On the monitor, the figure's head snapped toward the sound. Then the creak started. Footsteps, one at a time. The stairs groaned louder with each step. "Don't freeze," I whispered to myself. "Move, Clara. Move." I grabbed my phone, fingers slipping on the screen, but the call screen kept blinking away under my sweaty touch. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Desperate, I shoved the window open, rain blowing straight into my face. The shingles outside glistened, slick and black under the lightning. I didn't think. I climbed out barefoot, sliding on my knees, nails scraping the roof as thunder cracked overhead. The figure's steps reached the top of the stairs just as I leapt. Pain shot up my legs when I hit the muddy ground, but I forced myself to run, screaming into the storm, soaked and shaking. By the time the police arrived, I was still on the curb, arms wrapped around myself, teeth chattering. 2 cruisers pulled up, lights slicing through the rain. I tried to explain, my voice breaking, pointing at the house. "He's in there, someone was in there." He looked right at the camera. The officers searched every corner of the place. Upstairs, downstairs, basement, nothing. No sign of forced entry, they said. Just the back door glass cracked, though they couldn't explain how. Stranger still, the security feeds had gone dark between 11:55 and 12:15, the exact window when I saw him. I told them I wasn't going back inside. One officer offered to drive me to a friend's place. I stayed at my roommate Kara's for 3 days, and even there I barely slept. Every time the building creaked, I swore I heard those footsteps again. When Daniel came back from his hiking trip, I met him at a cafe instead of the house. I was pale, jittery, clutching my mug like it was the only solid thing in the world. "You're saying someone was in my house?" he asked slowly, brows furrowed. "Yes," I snapped, sharper than I meant to, at it. "I saw him. On your cameras, Daniel." He looked right. He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Storms cause interference. Maybe you saw." "Clara, those cameras are reliable, but sometimes don't," I cut in. "Don't make it sound like I imagined it." His eyes softened. "I'm not saying that. I believe you think you saw something, but the police didn't find anyone. No prints, no signs." I pushed away from the table, tears burning the back of my throat. "You weren't there." He reached for my hand, but I pulled back. That was the last time we talked about it. He let me grab my stuff in daylight, standing awkwardly by the porch as I loaded my car. But the story didn't end there. Back at my apartment, I tried to return to normal. Classes, thesis deadlines, latte orders. But at night, the storm replayed itself in my mind. The cameras, the shadow, the way he turned his head. I stopped sketching. I stopped answering calls from my parents. I spent hours scrolling aimlessly just to stay awake. One night, Kara found me sitting on the kitchen floor with the lights on, shaking. "Need help?" she said gently. "This isn't normal fear. This is trauma." "Clara, She wasn't wrong. I started therapy the next week. Dr. Patel listened as I described the night, the smell of rain, the sound of footsteps. She didn't dismiss me. She didn't call me paranoid. She just said, "Fear is the body remembering. Even when the danger is gone, the memory lives." Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me home. At 3 a.m, lying awake, I sometimes swore I heard the faint creak of stairs. My building didn't even have stairs like that. By winter, Seattle turned colder, darker. The storms passed, but my fear didn't. I'd jump at every knock on the cafe door. When a delivery guy left the back door propped open, I nearly screamed. One Saturday, Kara convinced me to go out just for groceries. We pulled into the lot and I froze before we even got inside. Across the street, parked in the shadow of a laundromat, was a car I recognized. An old silver sedan with a cracked bumper. I'd seen it before. Parked across from Daniel's house the day I left. "Clara?" Kara touched my arm. "What's wrong?" I shook my head, forcing a laugh, but my heart was thundering. "Nothing. Just thought I saw something." But I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't unfeel the weight of eyes on me. The nightmares returned harder after that. Always the same. The creak of footsteps, the shadow turning its head, the camera lens filling with a face I couldn't quite see. I'd wake drenched in sweat, convinced someone was standing just outside my door. Dr. Patel suggested grounding exercises. Tell yourself you're safe. List 5 things you see, 4 things you feel. It helped in the office, but alone at night it all fell apart. And then, one morning in February, I found something that made my blood run cold. A slip of paper under my apartment door. Blank. Just a folded piece of paper, damp from the hallway. No handwriting. no message. Just left there. I moved in with Kara permanently after that. My lease didn't matter anymore. I couldn't live alone. It's been years since that October, and I still can't bring myself to walk down Rainier Avenue. The house is probably rented out to someone new by now, someone who doesn't know what happened in those storm-soaked walls. I tell myself the intruder was real, that it wasn't a trick of the storm, or stress, or my own unraveling mind. The cameras went dark. The door was open. The footsteps were real. And yet the hardest part is not knowing. Not knowing if he was ever caught, or if he's still out there. Not knowing if I was chosen at random, or if he knew me. Not knowing if the fear will ever fully leave. Sometimes when thunder shakes the windows, I still wake up expecting to hear the stairs creak. Sometimes, in the half-dark of night, I swear I feel him watching, waiting for the moment I forget to lock the door. But I haven't forgotten. I never will. Safety isn't guaranteed, no matter how many locks, alarms, or cameras we put in place. Danger can slip through cracks we don't even notice. But trauma doesn't mean life ends there. Fear is a powerful shadow, but facing it, naming it, talking about it, getting help, is the only way forward. And maybe the deepest truth is this: peace isn't the absence of fear, but the courage to keep living even when the storm keeps knocking at your door. I was 21 when I learned that survival doesn't always mean walking away from danger with your body intact. Sometimes survival is just learning how to live with what you saw, with what followed you long after the snow melted. Back then, I didn't understand that. I thought moving into a little terraced house outside Newcastle would just be another stepping stone, a temporary choice. But choices don't always feel temporary once fear gets its claws into you. It was December 2014, and winter that year came down hard. The kind of cold that slices through every layer of clothing. The kind that leaves frost clinging to your breath. I'd just signed the lease on the house a week before, mostly because it was cheap and close to work. My friends thought I was crazy for leaving the student dorms, but I couldn't stand the noise anymore. I was in my final year of English literature, and with deadlines piling up, I thought solitude might save me. The house was old, and I knew it the moment I stepped inside. Wallpaper peeling like sunburn, windows that rattled when the wind hit them, a furnace in the basement that groaned like it had been alive once. But it was mine, at least for a little while, and that was enough. I didn't care if the place had character. I just needed quiet. That first week, the snow never stopped. It piled against the porch, made the gutters sag under thick icicles. My boots were always soaked, my hands always numb. But I got used to the silence in the house, to the sound of my own footsteps echoing in empty rooms. I told myself I was being strong, independent, even if I knew deep down it was just loneliness disguised as courage. The night everything started, I'd been walking home after a long shift at the cafe. My body ached from carrying trays and smiling at customers who tipped more advice than money. The streets were empty, the snow falling steady, covering everything in soft white. I cut past the bus stop like always, and that's when I saw him. A man sat on the stone wall, his clothes covered in what looked like dust or dried mud. His skin looked pale in the glow of the street lamp, too pale. He didn't move, didn't say a word, but his eyes, those flat, glassy eyes, followed me as I walked past. My stomach tightened, but I told myself not to be stupid. People waited around bus stops all the time. Maybe he was just resting. Maybe he was drunk. I quickened my pace, breath coming out in white clouds. Still, I couldn't shake the way his gaze stuck to me like frost on glass. By the time I reached my front door, my hands were shaking so bad I fumbled the keys twice. Inside, I locked the door fast and leaned against it, telling myself it was nothing. Just a tired girl in a cold city, seeing ghosts in the snow. But deep down, I knew something about that man wasn't right. I just didn't know how wrong it would get. The house creaked more than usual that night. Maybe it was the storm outside. Maybe the furnace finally giving up its fight. Either way, the noises carried differently when you were alone. I dropped my coat over the chair, turned the radiator up, and curled in front of it to thaw my fingers. That's when I heard it, one sharp thud from upstairs. I froze. My first thought was that the pipes had banged, but the sound didn't echo like pipes. It was heavier, more deliberate. My heart pounded as I stood, every instinct telling me to just leave it alone. But when you live alone, you don't get that option. You're the only one who can check. Step by step, I climbed the stairs, every board groaning under me. The hallway stretched narrow and cold, the walls close enough to feel like they were pressing in. That's when I noticed the door to the spare bedroom. It was ajar. I whispered, "Hello? Anyone there?" My voice cracked halfway through. Silence answered me, thick and heavy. I nudged the door open with my foot, bracing myself. The room looked empty at first, but then I saw them. Boot prints, damp, dark marks trailing, across the old floorboards straight to the window. I rushed to it, hands trembling as I pulled the curtain aside. And there he was, the same man from the bus stop, standing in my snowy garden. His clothes hung loose, his skin pale, his eyes locked on mine through the glass. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. My breath caught in my throat. I stumbled back from the window, fumbling for my phone. My fingers shook so badly I nearly dropped it. I hit call and put it on speaker, whispering fast when my friend picked up. "I think someone's watching me," I said, voice breaking. "Stay calm, Hannah," she said, her voice sharp now. "Call the police. Don't hang up, okay?" I nodded, though she couldn't see me. My knees felt weak, my chest tight. I started dialing, but before I could press call, the lights flickered. Once, twice. Then everything went black. The furnace groaned and died. The storm howled through the cracks in the windows, and in the dark, I could hear my own breath, shallow and panicked, as though I was drowning in it. The only thought in my head was escape. I shoved my feet into boots without socks, grabbed my coat, and bolted down the stairs. My fingers fumbled with the lock, but somehow I got the door open. Snow blasted into my face, the sting of cold biting every inch of skin. I didn't look back. I ran barefoot inside my boots, the icy ground tearing at my toes. My coat flapped open, the wind cutting straight through me, but I kept running. Past the houses, down the street, lungs burning. When I saw the neon glow of a convenience shop still open, I almost cried. I burst inside, collapsing against the counter. The clerk's eyes went wide as he rushed around. "What happened?" he asked, but my words tumbled out in pieces. "There's someone at my house, watching, inside. Please, call the police." He didn't waste time. He grabbed the phone, speaking fast into it while I sat shivering, hugging myself. Minutes dragged like hours until I saw the flashing blue lights outside. 2 officers questioned me as I tried to catch my breath. They drove me back to the house, though I begged them not to. I stayed in the car while they searched. The radio crackled, the snow fell harder, and I stared at my front door, half expecting him to step out of it. When the officers came back, their faces were tight. "The back door was forced," one said. "We found footprints inside, muddy tracks through the kitchen and up the stairs. But no one's there. Now. No one's there now." Those words didn't comfort me. They felt like a sentence, because it meant he had been there. He had been inside. And now, he was gone. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. Every creak in the dorm where I crashed at a friend's felt like footsteps. Every gust of wind against the window sounded like someone breathing. I tried to convince myself it was over, that the police scared him off. But the image of him in the snow, silent and still, burned into me. Those eyes, flat, unblinking, never left my head. When I went back to the house a week later to grab my things, I couldn't go inside alone. My friend Emma came with me, and even then I kept looking over my shoulder, waiting. The place felt wrong, colder than before, like it held the memory of him. The boot prints were gone, cleaned away, but I swore I could still see them, faint outlines across the floorboards. Emma tried to joke, tried to lighten the mood, but nothing reached me. When we loaded the last box into her car, I locked the door and told the landlord I was breaking the lease. I didn't care about the deposit. I just wanted out. For months after, I jumped at shadows. If a light flickered, I panicked. If someone walked too close behind me, I sped up. I started avoiding bus stops, avoiding any place where someone might sit and stare. And sometimes in the quiet of night, I'd catch myself glancing at the window, half expecting to see him there. Not random, not accidental, waiting. Years have passed since that winter, but the memory never softened. I still don't know who he was. The police never found him, never even gave me a name. Just a report filed away, another unsolved trespasser. But it was more than trespassing. It was a violation. A reminder that safety is fragile, temporary, an illusion we cling to. Now, whenever I hear a storm outside, I check my locks 3 times. I never rent a place that feels too quiet. And I don't ignore my gut anymore. That's the biggest change. Back then, I saw him at the bus stop and told myself I was being paranoid. Now, I'd trust that feeling. Because maybe he wasn't looking for me. Maybe he was just looking for anyone. But I'll never forget the way his eyes locked on mine. Like the house wasn't the thing he chose. Like it was me. Fear isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's your body sounding the alarm before your mind catches up. The world can strip away our sense of security in a second, but we're not powerless. Trust your instincts, set your boundaries, and never be ashamed of protecting yourself. Courage isn't about standing still in the face of danger. Sometimes courage is running into the snow barefoot because something inside tells you it's the only way to survive. When I first pulled into Raven Ridge in the fall of 2016, I thought I was making the smartest decision of my life. Cleveland had chewed me up and spit me out. A failed internship at a design agency that I thought would set me on track. A breakup that left me with half my stuff in boxes and a bank account that looked like a bad joke. I needed out. I needed air that didn't taste like regret. That's when Jordan called. He'd been my best friend since we were kids, and we'd always talked about living together once life settled down. His pitch was simple. There's this rental in Raven Ridge, 2 bedrooms, dirt cheap. Landlord doesn't ask questions. Come with me, man. We'll start over. I didn't think too hard about it. I packed up, said goodbye to the city, and 2 weeks later I was hauling boxes into a weathered house on Maplewood Lane. The place leaned a little. The paint was chipped, and the gutters sagged under the weight of last year's leaves, but it had a porch that looked out over the street. It wasn't Cleveland. That was enough. What I didn't know was that Raven Ridge wasn't the kind of place you start over in. The town was tired. Shuttered storefronts lined Main Street. For sale signs faded and leaning. Whole stretches of houses sat abandoned, their lawns overgrown, fences broken. The air carried this constant smell of wet earth and mildew. Rain came down almost every day, heavy enough to flood the gutters and leave puddles like lakes along the curbs. But what caught me most was the house across the street. A rotting Victorian, tall and skeletal, with broken shutters hanging off by a single hinge and vines choking the siding. Even in daylight it looked out of place, like it belonged to a different era entirely. The windows were cracked, their glass dulled with grime. Yet I swear, from the first night, it felt like those windows were watching. Jordan laughed when I said it. He always did. Dude, it's an abandoned house. Nobody's been in there for years. Relax. But he didn't sound all that convinced. That night, the storm rolled in. Thunder cracked so hard the windows in our place rattled. While unpacking dishes in the kitchen, I glanced out toward the Victorian. My stomach dropped. Behind the fractured upstairs window, a shadow moved. Slow, steady, deliberate. Jordan, I hissed, motioning him over. He leaned close, squinting into the storm. There's no way, he muttered. But the crease in his forehead told me he saw it too. That was the first night I started to wonder if I'd traded one nightmare for another. The next morning, the storm had eased into a misty drizzle. The street was quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavier than noise. While Jordan drove into town for groceries, I sat on the porch with a mug of stale coffee watching the Victorian. That's when our neighbor walked up. He was in his 60s, maybe older, with a face like weathered wood. His jacket was worn thin, his boots caked with mud. He stopped at the edge of the porch, gave me a nod, and glanced across the street. "Keep your curtains closed at night," he said, his voice gravelly. "That house doesn't stay empty long." I blinked at him. "Excuse me, what do you mean?" He shook his head. "Just take my advice. Don't stare too long. Folks that do usually regret it." And with that, he shuffled down the street, muttering to himself. When Jordan came back, I told him what the man said. He laughed, dropping the grocery bags onto the counter. Classic small-town scare tactic. They probably tell that story to anyone who moves in. Makes life in a dying town a little more interesting. But it didn't feel like a story. The way the man looked at that house, like he was remembering something he wished he could forget, sat heavy with me. That night, the storm came back worse than before. The rain hammered the roof, the wind whistled through the cracks in the windows. I sat in the living room, staring out at the Victorian, every shadow inside it pulling at me. At some point, Jordan joined me, his face pale. "I think we should check it out," he said. I stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "Are you serious?" "Yeah. If someone's squatting in there, we should know. I don't want to wake up to find they've broken in here. We go in, look around. That's it." I wanted to argue, but the truth was the thought of not knowing scared me worse. So I nodded. And just like that, we decided we'd go inside. It was midnight when we stepped off our porch. The rain slicked the street, our shoes sinking into the soggy grass as we crossed. The Victorian loomed above us, its windows dark and cracked, its roofline jagged against the storm. Jordan pushed the door first. It groaned but opened. Inside, the air was damp, heavy with mildew. The smell of rot made me gag. But what unsettled me most wasn't the decay. It was the order. Every piece of furniture was draped neatly with white sheets as though someone had taken care to preserve it. Family photos still sat scattered on the mantel, their frames dusty but the images inside untouched. A little girl with a crooked smile, a couple standing in front of the very house we were in. The place wasn't trashed like you'd expect from squatters. It looked waiting, like the family had stepped out for groceries and never returned. "Creepy," Jordan whispered, his flashlight beam darting across the walls. We climbed the staircase, each step moaning under our weight. Upstairs, the hallway stretched long and narrow. The wallpaper peeled in strips, revealing old plaster beneath. Then it came. Another sound. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Deliberate. Not ours. "Jordan," I whispered, my throat dry. But he was right beside me, flashlight trembling in his hand. His face was as pale as the sheets draped across the furniture. The footsteps grew closer, echoing in the silence. That's when panic took over. We bolted, sprinting down the stairs so fast I slipped on the slick floor, catching myself on the banister. The door banged open and we tore across the street, rain lashing our faces. When we reached our porch, I turned back, gasping for air. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the Victorian. And for just a second in the upstairs window, I saw them. Two faces, pale, still, staring. We didn't sleep that night. Every sound made us jump. Every flicker of light across the window pulled our eyes. By morning, we looked like ghosts ourselves. I couldn't let it go. I needed answers. So I walked over to Cliff's house, the neighbor who'd warned me. He was on his porch smoking a cigarette, staring off like the storm itself had worn him out. "I saw someone in that house," I told him. My voice shook. "Window. Not squatters. Faces." And the Cliff stared at me a long time before speaking. "A family lived there once. Good people. Their daughter disappeared one night, middle of a storm. They searched for days, but she was gone. Parents couldn't take it, left everything behind. Some say she still comes back, And maybe she brings company. I swallowed hard. So what are you saying? It's haunted? He shrugged, flicking ash into the wet grass. I'm saying it doesn't stay empty long. Doesn't matter who, doesn't matter why. People see things, and people leave. You'd be smart to do the same. When I went back inside, Jordan was already packing. He didn't need convincing, neither did I. By the end of the week, we were gone. We moved states away into a small apartment with walls too thin and neighbors too loud, but I didn't care. Anything was better than Raven Ridge. Still, the memory followed me. Sometimes when storms rolled over our new place, I'd hear them again. The footsteps on the stairs, steady and heavy. Sometimes in flashes of lightning, I'd see their faces in the glass. Jordan won't talk about it. If I bring it up, he changes the subject, his jaw tight. I don't blame him. Some things don't get lighter when you share them. But I can't shake the thought that what we saw wasn't ours to see. That maybe some houses hold on to their stories, and if you step too far inside, you become part of them. Not every place is meant to be understood, and not every mystery deserves our curiosity. Some doors stay closed for a reason, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is respect the warning. In life, it's easy to let curiosity push us into places that aren't ours to enter, whether that's in houses, in people, or in memories. But not all answers bring peace. Some only bring shadows you can't unsee. I was 24 when I moved into the yellow house on Cedar Grove Drive in Austin. It was spring of 2015, and the air carried that restless warmth that hinted summer wasn't far behind. I was in graduate school for journalism, buried in assignments, working part-time at a bookstore that paid me just enough to cover groceries, and living with the constant hum of student debt in the back of my head. When the rental came up, cheap rent, split 4 ways, it felt like I'd won a small lottery. The house itself looked welcoming at first. Wide porch, shaded by a sprawling oak, creaky hardwood floors that smelled faintly of lemon polish, and enough space for 4 graduate students to feel like adults, at least on paper. My roommates were all women I'd met through the program. Kayla, who was kind but absent-minded, Erin, who kept to herself most of the time, and Rachel, who seemed nice in the beginning but revealed herself quickly as the storm I hadn't anticipated. Rachel had a way of speaking that felt like a blade wrapped in silk. The first fights were over dishes left in the sink, my laundry in the dryer too long, noise when she wanted silence. She smiled when she made her digs, but they stuck with me long after. Maybe journalism isn't your thing, Soph. You never finish what you start. I laughed in front of her, but later I sat in my room and cried quietly into my pillow. At first I tried to win her over. I offered to swap chores, bought extra groceries, even invited her to study with me. Nothing softened her. It wasn't just me she jabbed at, but I was her favorite target. The others noticed but didn't step in, probably because they didn't want to be next. Still, the house gave me something. Space. I could sit on the porch with my notebook, scribble story ideas, and pretend the world was bigger than Cedar Grove Drive. I told myself I could outlast Rachel, that graduate school was temporary, that people like her didn't matter in the long run. I wanted to believe it. But then, Nathan came knocking. The weekend my roommates planned a beach trip, I decided to stay behind. I claimed I had too much work, but the truth was I needed the break. I wanted silence. When they left Friday afternoon, laughter spilling out as they hauled coolers into Rachel's beat-up Jeep, I felt a wave of relief. For the first time in months, the house was mine. I spent Saturday barefoot on the porch, reading, sipping sweet tea, feeling like I could finally breathe. But the peace didn't last. Around 7, there was a knock at the door. Loud, insistent. I set my mug down and opened it, expecting maybe the landlord or a delivery gone to the wrong address. Instead, Nathan stood there. Rachel's boyfriend. Nathan had always rubbed me the wrong way. Too loud, too sure of himself, always with a smirk that said he was in on a joke you didn't get. Seeing him there, leaning against the frame like he owned the place, unsettled me. "Didn't expect me, huh?" he said. I frowned. "Rachel's not here." He shrugged. "That's fine. I'm here for you." At first I thought he was kidding, but when he pulled out his phone and showed me pictures of me in my bedroom, taken through the thin curtains, I felt the blood drain from my face. My room, my safe space, violated. "Either you play nice, or Rachel gets these," he whispered. My hands shook. "Get out, Nathan." He smirked, stepping closer. "You really think she'll believe you?" Something inside me snapped. I shoved him hard, slammed the door, and locked it. My whole body trembled as I slid to the floor, phone clutched in my hand. I called Rachel. No answer. Straight to voicemail. That night I barely slept. Every creak of the house felt like him coming back. The shadows seemed heavier, darker. I realized the house wasn't just creaky. It was vulnerable. And so was I. By morning, my nightmare got worse. The photos Nathan had threatened with were now in our group chat. Rachel came home furious, her voice sharp enough to cut the air. "You think you're clever, don't you? Trying to steal Nathan? This is pathetic, Sophie." I stood in the kitchen, shaking, trying to explain. Me knowing. "He came here last night. I didn't send those. He took them without, save it," she snapped. Kayla and Aaron stood by awkwardly, neither stepping in, their silence louder than words. I went to my room and broke down. Everything inside me screamed to run, to pack my things and leave Cedar Grove behind. But another voice, quieter but stronger, told me to stay, to fight. That night I texted Nathan, told him I wanted to talk. He agreed to meet at a cafe near campus. He thought he'd won. I slipped my phone into my pocket, recording app running. When he leaned back in his chair, grinning smugly, I pushed him. "Why? Why do this? Why me?" He laughed, actually laughed, and sipped his coffee. "Rachel wanted you gone, said you were dead weight, a drag on the house. This was just the fastest way. I'm helping her out." The words were like poison, but they were also my weapon. Every arrogant syllable was caught on my phone. Back at the house, I sent the recording, not just to Kayla and Aaron, but to Rachel's parents, her classmates, her internship supervisor at the local news station. I wanted everyone to hear the truth. By the next day, Rachel's mask had cracked. She screamed at me, her fury uncontained, but she couldn't deny what was on the recording. Her internship was pulled. Nathan was dumped. Her reputation sank fast, and for once her sharp words bounced off me. Kayla and Aaron apologized, muttering they should have believed me. I didn't want their pity. I packed my things. When I walked out of Cedar Grove for the last time, I didn't look back. The porch that once felt like freedom now felt like a stage where someone else had scripted my humiliation. But I wasn't the same Sophie who had moved in months before. I had evidence, truth, and a voice, and I wasn't afraid to use it anymore. I found a studio apartment across town, small but mine. No roommates, no knives disguised as compliments, no boyfriends lurking at the door. At night, I sat by the window scribbling notes for stories, my camera beside me. But sometimes, in the quiet hours, the memory returned. Nathan's smirk, Rachel's cold laughter, the knock on the door that changed everything. I told myself it wasn't weakness to remember. It was armor. It reminded me how quickly trust could turn into betrayal, how fragile safety could be. And as I pushed deeper into journalism, interviewing people who had been silenced, digging into truths others wanted buried, I carried Cedar Grove with me. Not as shame, not as fear, but as proof that I could stand, even when the ground beneath me felt like it was crumbling. Sometimes the real danger isn't the stranger outside, but the people who share your roof. Betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from those you trust. But truth is stronger than lies, and silence only feeds cruelty. Standing up for yourself, even when your voice shakes, is the first step toward freedom. And once you find that strength, no one can take it away from you. The summer of 1997 is burned into me like a scar. I was 16, restless, angry, and still stumbling through the haze of losing my older brother. 1 year earlier, a car accident had ripped him out of my life in an instant, and nothing had been the same since. My dad worked nights at the mill and barely spoke at dinner. My mom dulled herself with pills, sitting on the couch like a ghost. Home was no longer home. It was a place where doors slammed, silence stretched, and grief clung to the walls. Behind our backyard fence stood the house we called the back house. It had been empty for as long as I could remember. Its paint had faded into a sick gray, the shutters hung crooked like broken wings, and the roof sagged like it was ready to give up. Kids in the neighborhood made up stories about it, witches, drifters, ghosts, but no one ever really went inside. I wasn't supposed to care. I had enough of my own pain without dragging another mystery into it. But at night, lying in bed, I'd hear it. A low, steady buzzing, like a giant wire vibrating somewhere deep in the walls. There was no electricity running to that place. Everyone knew it. Yet the sound returned every night, humming under the quiet. I'd whisper to myself, "There's no power in there. There can't be." But repeating the words didn't stop the sound. If anything, it made it worse. My best friend, Ryan Delaney, Rye to everyone, was the only one who believed me. He was the kind of kid who laughed too loud in class and lived for trouble, but he also had this unshakable loyalty. One July afternoon, sitting in my room with the fan clattering against the window, I finally confessed how bad it had gotten. "You're still hearing it?" he asked, leaning back on my bed. "Every night," I said. "It's like it's calling me." He raised an eyebrow, half daring, half worried. "We've been talking about it for months. You want answers? We go tonight. Flashlights, camera, the works. If we don't, you'll never stop hearing that sound." I wanted to say no. I wanted to stay safe, stay small. But what came out of my mouth was, "Okay." We climbed the fence that night at 9:47 sharp. I remember the time because my digital watch glowed green in the dark when I checked it, like I was crossing into another world. The weeds in the yard came up to our knees, damp with dew. I carried my dad's heavy Maglite flashlight, and Rye clutched his cousin's camcorder like it was a talisman. The air smelled of mildew and rust, and somewhere in the distance a dog barked once, then stopped. The back door was warped but unlocked. When we pushed it open, the hinges screamed like an animal in pain. Inside, the place looked exactly how you'd expect an abandoned house to look. Broken chairs, peeling wallpaper, ceiling stained by years of leaks. My flashlight cut through dust that swirled like ash. I almost laughed in relief. "See? Nothing." But Rye froze. His light caught something in the kitchen. On the cracked linoleum sat 2 metal dog bowls. One was empty. The other was filled with kibble that looked fresh. Not moldy, not old. Soft, smelling faintly of meat. "This isn't old," I whispered, crouching beside it. My fingers shook as I touched it. And then the buzzing started again, louder than ever, as if the walls themselves vibrated. Before we could move, a guttural yelp tore through the house. It wasn't an animal sound. It was human, raw and broken. Then came a man's voice, deep and commanding. "Eat it. Now." My stomach turned to stone. Rye's eyes widened. But instead of running, we did the dumbest thing we could. We crept toward the stairs. Each step on the staircase groaned under our weight. The buzzing grew heavier the higher we climbed, pressing on my skull, vibrating in my teeth. At the end of the narrow hallway, a sliver of light spilled through a cracked door. I pushed it open with my fingertips. My breath caught in my throat. The sight inside will never leave me. 3 people knelt on the floor, their heads bowed low. Thick collars wrapped their necks, nailed to the boards so they couldn't stand. Their hair was matted, their skin mottled with bruises. They were on all fours, trembling. One lifted her face, eyes glassy with tears. "Help us," she whispered. Standing over them was a gaunt man in filthy clothes. His jaw was sharp as bone, and in his hand was a crackling stun gun. He turned at the sound of the door, His eyes met mine, cold and furious. "Run!" Rye shouted. The man lunged. In a blur, he jammed the stun gun into Rye's ribs. My friend convulsed, his scream strangled. He crumpled to the floor, body twitching. I couldn't move. The buzzing roared in my ears like a hive of bees. Fear pinned me in place. My chest locked, my hands useless. Then instinct took over. I bolted. I crashed down the stairs, scraped my leg raw climbing the fence, and stumbled into my house. I grabbed the phone, fingers slippery with sweat, and dialed 911. My words tumbled out in a panic. "Man, stun gun, people chained, please hurry." The operator tried to calm me, but guilt consumed me. Rye was still there. I should have stayed hidden, but I couldn't. The thought of Rye alone in that house gnawed at me, so I grabbed a rusted pipe from the garage and went back. My legs shook as I climbed the fence again, but adrenaline drove me forward. Inside, the house smelled of sweat and rot. The buzzing seemed to rise from the walls themselves. Upstairs, the man was dragging Rye toward the chained victims, muttering under his breath. His stun gun lay on the floor where he'd dropped it. I swung the pipe. It connected with his arm, and he howled as the stun gun clattered away. He turned on me, eyes blazing, but before he could move again, sirens wailed outside. Red and blue lights cut through the broken windows. Police stormed the hallway, tackling him to the floor. I stumbled back against the wall, shaking as officers pulled Rye up and led the victims to safety. Their sobs filled the air. Later, I learned the man's name, Gerald Weiland, a disgraced vet tech. The people chained upstairs were missing persons from nearby towns. He'd been keeping them there, hidden in plain sight, just beyond my backyard fence. The back house didn't stand much longer. Within a year, it was torn down, leaving only a barren lot. The kids in the neighborhood avoid it even now, like the ground itself remembers. Rye survived, though the burns on his ribs from the stun gun never fully faded. We didn't talk about that night much, but sometimes when we passed each other in school, he'd give me a look that said he remembered everything too. As for me, I never forgot the sound. That low, steady buzzing. Sometimes even now, when I walk past the empty lot, I swear I still hear it, humming through the silence. I used to think monsters lived in forests or under beds, but I know better now. Sometimes they live in houses that look forgotten. Sometimes they're only a fence away. Fear can paralyze you, but courage means moving even when you're shaking. Evil doesn't always announce itself with shadows or legends. It hides in plain sight, in places we think are harmless. Ignoring it doesn't make it disappear. Facing it, even with trembling hands, is what makes survival possible. And sometimes, listening to that gut feeling, the one that whispers something's wrong, is the only thing that saves you. I was 22 when I left Willow Court. I'd grown up in that apartment complex, and for years it had been more than just a building. It was its own little world. Kids rode their bikes in circles around the courtyard until the streetlights came on. Neighbors knocked on each other's doors with leftover casseroles or borrowed tools. It was the kind of place where you never felt alone, for better or worse. But by 2019, I felt trapped by it. Every time I walked up the stairs to my mom's apartment, I felt like a kid again, not the man I was trying to be. I wanted independence. I wanted to say I lived on my own, even if on my own meant scraping together money for rent and eating ramen 3 nights a week. So when I found a listing for a narrow 2-story house on Birchwood Lane, the rent cheaper than anything near downtown Portland, I jumped. I told my mom, it's time I had my own space. She didn't argue, though I could see the worry in her eyes. To save money, I invited my cousin Noah to move in with me. He had just dropped out of community college and didn't have much of a plan, but I figured it would work. He was family. The house itself wasn't much. The porch paint peeled like sunburn, the tiny yard was always full of damp leaves, and the banister groaned under the slightest touch. But when I first carried my boxes inside, I felt proud. It was old and creaky, but it was mine. At first, life there was exciting. Noah and I stayed up too late, playing video games and ordering greasy pizza. We laughed about the freedom, about how nobody could tell us what to do anymore. But the adjustment wasn't as smooth as I pretended. Noah kept odd hours disappearing without explanation, coming back long after midnight. He brushed me off when I asked about it, and I didn't push. I worked nights at a grocery store, and between shifts and bills, I didn't have the energy to dig into his secrets. What unsettled me more than Noah was the street itself. Birchwood Lane wasn't like Willow Court. It had no hum of neighbors, no laughter drifting from open windows. It was quiet. Too quiet. Across from us sat a property that looked abandoned, windows boarded up, ivy climbing its walls, the roof sagging in the middle. I told myself it was just part of the neighborhood's charm, the kind of thing you got used to, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than empty. Sometimes, standing on our porch after work, I caught myself staring at it too long. And one evening, as the leaves skittered down the sidewalk and the air smelled of rain, I saw him. A young man slipping out from the side of the boarded house, his face pale, his steps deliberate. He looked at me for half a second before disappearing into the alley. My stomach twisted. I didn't know it yet, but that was the beginning of the end of Birchwood Lane for me. I tried to convince myself the man I saw was nothing. Maybe a squatter, maybe just some guy cutting through. But the more I brushed it off, the more I noticed him. Sometimes when I came home from work, he'd be across the street leaning against the fence. Other times I'd glance at our stairwell and swear I saw a shadow move, only to find nothing there. He never spoke, never came close. He only watched. When I finally told Noah, he just shrugged. Portland, half the city's camping somewhere. Probably just a squatter. Don't get worked up. But it wasn't just the fact that he was there. It was the way he was there. Too still, too focused. Like he wasn't watching the house at all. He was watching me. One night, coming home past midnight, I froze on the porch. Muddy footprints trailed up the steps. Fresh, slick from the rain. They didn't match my shoes. They didn't match Noah's. My chest tightened. I unlocked the door with shaking hands, bolted it behind me, and spent the night pacing the living room, listening to the rain tap the glass. A few days later, a neighbor stopped by. She was middle-aged, her coat pulled tight against the drizzle. "Be careful," she said, nodding toward the boarded house. "That kid's been hanging around too long. He doesn't belong here." Her words settled heavy in me, because by then, I didn't need the warning. I already knew. October crept in, the air colder, the nights sharper. I started changing my routine, taking different buses home, walking different streets, anything to shake the feeling of being followed. But the pale man always seemed to find me. One night, I heard footsteps behind me as I cut through the wet alley near Birchwood. I sped up. So did he. The echo of shoes on pavement matched my own, until I broke into a run, bursting onto the main street with my lungs burning. When I turned back, the alley was empty. Noah thought I was paranoid. "You're just not used to living here alone," he said. "Coddled at Willow Court your whole life. Not everyone out here smiles and waves. You've been..." Maybe he was right. Maybe I was imagining half of it. But then came the night that ended it. I woke around 2 a.m. to a scraping sound, slow, rhythmic. My window rattled faintly. Heart hammering, I pulled back the curtain. He was there, the pale man. Perched in the oak tree outside my window, his body crouched on a bent branch, his face tilted upward, eyes fixed directly on mine. For a moment, the world went silent. Just me and him, staring through the glass. My throat closed. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped my phone as I dialed 911. The police arrived within minutes, red and blue lights cutting through the dark. By the time they searched, the man was gone. But the evidence was there. The branch bent low under fresh weight, muddy shoe prints in the wet leaves below. "Probably just some transient," one officer said, but his voice didn't convince me. Noah insisted we stay. That power. "He's gone now. You're letting this guy live in your head. Don't give him..." But it wasn't about power. It was about safety. The house no longer felt like a start. It felt like a cage, one with thin walls and locks too flimsy to matter. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle outside became proof he was still out there. I lasted 2 more weeks, sleeping in fits, jumping at every sound. Then I packed. My mom didn't say "I told you so" when I showed up at Willow Court with boxes. She just hugged me, like she'd known this day would come. Back at Willow Court, life felt both comforting and suffocating. The neighbors still left their doors unlocked, kids still rode bikes in circles, and my mom still knocked with leftover casseroles. But I wasn't the same. I couldn't unsee his face, pale and intent, staring at me from the tree. I couldn't unhear the scrape of the branch against my window. Even in the safety of Willow Court, I found myself checking locks, glancing over my shoulder, tensing at every crunch of leaves outside. It wasn't the house on Birchwood Lane that haunted me. It was the knowledge that the man hadn't been watching it. He'd been watching me. And maybe he still was. Independence isn't just about moving out. It's about knowing when to protect yourself, even if that means admitting you can't handle something alone. I thought leaving Willow Court would make me stronger, but strength isn't measured by how long you endure danger. It's measured by how quickly you recognize it and act. Some houses, some people, carry shadows you don't have to live under. Listening to fear doesn't make you weak. Sometimes it's the one thing that keeps you alive. I never thought much about house sitting before that fall. At 19, all I cared about was passing classes, finding enough cash for books, and maybe getting a full night's sleep. I was a sophomore at Ridgewater University in upstate New York, and the semester was already chewing me up. Sociology sounded fun when I picked it. People, cultures, communities. It felt like the kind of subject that could open doors. But the reality was long essays my professors tore apart, and exams that made me feel like I didn't know a thing. Add in a roommate who thought midnight was the perfect time to invite half the dorm over for karaoke, and I was hanging by a thread. That's why the flyer caught my eye. It was pinned to the old wooden board in the student center where people advertised guitar lessons or rides home for Thanksgiving. House sitter needed, Brook Hill, weekend only, good pay. The words looked like they'd been typed in a rush, but my eyes stuck on good pay. I pulled one of the little strips with the number and called before I could overthink it. A woman named Carla answered, her voice kind and calm. She and her husband needed someone to watch their house while they went to a wedding in Vermont. It wasn't far, just 30 minutes outside the city. She asked if I was comfortable being alone in a house for the weekend. I almost laughed. Being alone sounded like paradise. I told her I'd take it. That Friday evening, I drove out of town in my beat-up Honda Civic. The campus buzz gave way to quiet roads lined with fiery red and orange trees. The sun was sinking behind the hills when I pulled up to the Layton's place. Their house was a pale blue farmhouse with wide windows glowing warm in the dusk. A wraparound porch circled the front, the kind of place you'd expect to see in a painting. Carla met me at the door, smiling like she already trusted me. She smelled faintly of cinnamon. Her husband, Mark, shook my hand firmly. They gave me the tour. Kitchen stocked with groceries, alarm code written neatly on a sticky note, a guest room upstairs with crisp white sheets. Mark mentioned something in passing that made my stomach twist. There's been a few break-ins around here recently. Just petty stuff, nothing serious. Keep the doors locked. Emergency numbers are on the fridge. He said it casually, like reminding me to water the plants. I nodded, trying not to look nervous. Carla thanked me a dozen times. By the time they pulled out of the driveway, the house was silent, and for the first time in months, so was my life. I FaceTimed my roommate to show off. Finally, a bed without drunk people screaming outside the window, I said, stretching out across the comforter. She rolled her eyes and told me not to raid their fridge too much. We laughed. Then she hung up, leaving me in the stillness. It was strange, that quiet. Almost too quiet. I brushed it off and pulled out my laptop, thinking I'd catch up on notes. Sometime past 1 in the morning, I heard it, a faint click. At first, I thought it was the heating system, But then came a low humming, soft and steady, like a motor running somewhere it shouldn't. My eyes darted around the room. It was coming from the closet. I froze, the laptop light flickering against my face. A thin strip of brightness glowed from under the closet door, like a bulb was on inside. My pulse pounded. I hadn't turned on any closet light. Whispering to myself, "It's nothing, just wiring." I grabbed my phone flashlight. My hand trembled as I twisted the knob and yanked the door open. Empty. Just coats, shoes, a couple of storage boxes. I flicked the switch and the light went out instantly. I shut the door hard and climbed back into bed, pretending my heart wasn't trying to beat out of my chest. The morning made me laugh at myself. Sunlight does that. It makes the fears of the night look ridiculous. I brewed some coffee, made toast, and wandered the house. The place had that lived-in charm. Family photos in silver, frames, books stacked neatly on shelves, the faint smell of cedar in the hallways. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. In the downstairs hallway, behind a standing shelf, was a narrow door. The paint was chipped, almost blending with the wall. I tugged at the knob, but it was locked. A prickle crawled up my arms. I was sure Carla hadn't shown me this door during the tour. I stepped back, trying not to let my imagination spin out. I texted Carla just to check in. A smiling emoji. I didn't mention the locked door. "House is fine, all quiet. Hope you're having fun." She sent back that evening. The quiet pressed in heavier than before. I tried to distract myself with TV, but every creak of the wood sounded deliberate. Every gust of wind against the porch like footsteps. Around 11:30, a sharp knock rattled the front door. My heart jumped into my throat. I tiptoed over and peered through the peephole. Nothing. The porch was empty, the light glowing on still air. I whispered aloud, "Okay, just the wind. Kids messing around." But as I crawled into bed trying to convince myself I was fine, the clicking returned. Louder this time. Then came the humming again, closer, as though it were moving with me. My laptop screen suddenly lit up. My roommate was FaceTiming me. Relieved, I answered quickly, "Hey, you will not believe how creepy this house gets at night." But her face was pale, eyes wide. "Clara, there's someone standing behind you." I spun around so fast the laptop nearly fell. The closet door, the one I swore I'd shut, was cracked open. The humming filled the room again. My whole body shook. I slammed the laptop shut, yanked the blankets over myself like I was 10 years old again, and whispered, "It's not real. It's not real." But I didn't sleep a second that night. Morning light again tried to wash the fear away. I checked the closet first thing, heart pounding. Empty. Nothing but coats and boxes. I laughed shakily, trying to convince myself it was stress. I was tired, overworked, and maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. That had to be it. The rest of the day I tried to stay busy. I read. I cleaned the kitchen even though it didn't need it. I watched bad TV shows. Anything to drown out the silence. But the house seemed to know I was nervous. Little things felt off. A picture frame tilted slightly when I swore it had been straight. A draft brushed my neck in the hallway even with all the windows closed. And then there was the narrow door again. Every time I walked past it, it seemed to pull at my attention as though daring me to try again. That night, I set up camp in the living room with every lamp on. I told myself I'd stay up, maybe watch movies until dawn. But by 2 in the morning, my eyelids grew heavy. I must have dozed off because I woke with a start at a sound I couldn't mistake this time. The sound of footsteps on the upstairs floor. Slow, steady, deliberate. My breath caught. I was frozen on the couch, staring up at the ceiling, listening to each creak above me. I reached for my phone, but my hands were trembling so badly I nearly dropped it. Finally, I dialed Carla's number. No answer. I tried Mark. Straight to voicemail. I whispered to myself, Okay, it's an old house, just wood shifting." Then a door upstairs slammed. Hard. I grabbed the baseball bat Mark had left by the back door. He joked it was his security system, and crept up the stairs one step at a time. My heart felt like it would explode. At the top of the stairs, the guest bedroom door stood open. The closet inside was wide this time, the humming louder than ever. And the narrow door in the hallway? It wasn't locked anymore. It was open. By Sunday morning, I was done. I packed my bag in record time, barely checking to make sure I hadn't left anything. My nerves were frayed, my chest tight with exhaustion and fear. I locked every door behind me, double-checking like a maniac. As I reached my car, I turned for one last look at the house. That narrow door in the hallway, the one that had been locked when I arrived. It stood wide open, plain as day, like it had never been shut at all. I drove back to campus, heart hammering the entire 30 minutes. I didn't tell Carla or Mark the details. I just said everything was fine and thanked them for the opportunity. But I knew what I saw, what I heard. Maybe there was someone living in the walls. Maybe it was something stranger. Maybe it was just my mind breaking under stress. I never found out. And I never went back. Sometimes the scariest thing isn't ghosts or monsters, but the feeling of being unsafe in a place that should protect you. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Safety isn't worth risking for politeness or denial. We owe it to ourselves to listen to that inner alarm before it's too late. I was 15 the summer everything changed. Up until then, my world was small. Our yellow house on Willow Lane, the cracked sidewalk where I learned to ride a bike, the chalk drawings Max and I covered the driveway with every June. I thought that house was permanent. My parents had bought it before I was born, and every memory I carried seemed tied to its walls. But permanence is a fragile thing. When my dad came home with a pinched expression one evening, my mom's face told me before his words did. The company was laying people off. He hadn't been fired, not yet, but his hours were slashed. Bills stacked higher each month. The house, with its mortgage and upkeep, became too heavy to carry. We were moving to a smaller place across town. Downsizing, my parents called it. Survival, I thought. Max, my younger brother, was 12. He didn't understand the numbers, only what they meant. No more treehouse in the backyard. No more secret paths through the woods. No more late-night games of flashlight tag with kids we'd known our whole lives. He asked questions my parents didn't know how to answer. Are we taking the treehouse with us? What about the chalk drawings? He looked to me for reassurance, and all I could do was shrug, pretending it didn't gut me too. But even before the move, something darker settled over that summer. It lived next door. The Harris family's squat gray house felt like an eyesore compared to the tidy lawns of Norm Ridge. Their blinds were always closed. Their father worked nights, rarely seen. Their mother, if she existed, was invisible. The two sons, Luke and Caleb, carried themselves like shadows that didn't belong. Luke was 17, all height and smirk, with a stare that felt like he was measuring you. Caleb was my age, but harder around the edges, eyes sharp in a way that didn't match being 15. They didn't play with neighborhood kids, didn't ride bikes, didn't join in anything. People whispered about them, but nobody got close enough to know for sure. I used to avoid looking at that house. Something about it unsettled me, though I couldn't explain why. That changed one sticky June evening, when Luke showed up at our fence. "Want to hang out?" he said, leaning against the wood like he'd done it 100 times before. "We're heading down to the creek, got BB guns, should be fun." I hesitated. Luke had never spoken more than a word to me, but Max's eyes lit up at the mention of guns. He tugged my sleeve, whispering, "Come on, let's go." Against my better judgment, I agreed. I told myself it might even be good to have one last adventure before the move. We followed Luke and Caleb through the tall grass toward the creek. Fireflies lit up around us. For a moment, it almost felt normal. But when Luke unzipped the duffel bag he carried, the normalcy cracked. Inside weren't BB guns. They were real pistols, heavy and black, glinting in the fading sun. Max froze, clutching my arm. I stammered, We don't want any part of that." Luke just grinned. He lifted a pistol casually, aimed at a rusted can, and fired. The sound was louder than I imagined, a crack that shook my bones. Birds scattered from the trees. "Scared?" he sneered. "Don't worry, we don't miss." He and Caleb laughed, taking turns firing into the woods, the smell of gunpowder stinging the air. Max and I stepped back, muttering excuses, but Luke's grin shifted into something darker. He raised the pistol just enough, eyes fixed on me. "If you tell anyone," he whispered, "you won't see 16. Got it?" That night I didn't eat. Every creak of our house made me flinch. The first time I saw the flashlight beam, I thought it was a dream. My room faced the Harris's yard, and sometime past midnight, light flickered across my wall. I pulled back the curtain and saw Luke standing there, a flashlight in one hand. He tilted his head, smiled like it was private joke, and made a gun shape with his fingers, pointing it straight at me. I slammed the curtain shut, heart hammering. I wanted to tell my parents right then, but the image of Luke's grin and his whispered threat pinned me down. If I said anything, what if he followed through? Worse, what if Max got hurt? The next morning I pretended everything was fine. I pushed cereal around my bowl while Dad talked about the moving truck. Mom hummed like she always did when she was stressed. Max kicked my leg under the table, his eyes asking if I was okay. I forced a smile, but the harassment only grew. A handful of BB pellets appeared scattered on our porch one day. Another time, a dead crow lay on the back step, wings twisted, eyes glazed. Max screamed when he saw it, and I rushed him inside, telling him it was just nature. I buried it in the woods, my hands shaking. One evening, as my parents sat on the porch sorting bills, the living room window shattered. A rock clattered onto the carpet. Dad cursed, rushing outside, but the street was empty. I knew better. I'd glimpsed Caleb's shape melting back into the Harris's shadows, and Luke lingering behind, lifting the pistol in silent warning. That night, Max crawled into my bed. "They hate us," he whispered. "They're trying to hurt us." His voice cracked like he wanted to cry but wouldn't. I wrapped an arm around him, my own fear clawing up my throat. I wanted to promise him we'd be safe, but the words stuck. I didn't know if they were true. As July dragged on, fear became normal. Every knock on the door, every sound outside felt like it could be them. I watched Max change. He was quieter, shoulders tense, laughter rare. He still asked about the treehouse sometimes, but mostly he asked me if I'd heard anything at night. I always said no, even when I had. One afternoon, I came home from biking around the block and found Max sitting on the curb. "They showed me," he whispered. I crouched beside him. "Showed you pale and shaking." "What?" He hesitated, then pulled something from his pocket. A single bullet, cool and heavy in his palm. "Caleb gave it to me. Said it had my name on it." I nearly snatched it away, fury and terror colliding. "Why didn't you tell Mom or Dad?" "Because," he said, voice trembling. "What if they do something worse?" I knew he was right. Our parents couldn't protect us from boys who slipped through the night like shadows. All summer I carried the weight of that secret, pretending everything was fine. I smiled when neighbors asked about the move. I nodded when Dad talked about the new house being a fresh start. Inside, I was choking. The worst came one humid night in late July. I woke to the sound of scratching at my window. Pulling back the curtain, I saw Caleb grinning, his face inches from the glass. Behind him, Luke stood in the yard, raising the pistol slowly. My whole body froze. He didn't point it directly at me, just high enough that I understood. He mouthed words I couldn't hear, but I knew the meaning. "Don't tell." By August, the moving truck arrived. Our house was stripped bare, rooms echoing as we carried boxes out. I should have felt relief. A new house meant distance, and distance meant safety. But guilt gnawed at me. As we drove away, Max leaned against my shoulder. "We're safe now, right?" he whispered. I nodded, forcing confidence I didn't feel. "Yeah, Max, we're safe." But I didn't believe it. That night, in our new house, I lay awake listening to silence. No flashlight beams, no rocks against the siding. Still, I couldn't shake the image of Luke's grin, the pistol glinting in the dark, Caleb's face in my window. Safety felt fragile, like glass ready to shatter. Even years later, I dream of that summer. The creak, the echo of gunshots, the weight of the bullet in Max's hand. I tell myself it's over, that those boys are just memories now. But deep down, I know monsters like that don't vanish. They linger in the corners of your mind, reminding you of the nights you didn't speak up, the secrets you kept out of fear. Silence can feel like protection, but it's a prison. By staying quiet, I thought I was shielding my brother and myself. In truth, I let fear control me. Looking back, I wish I'd spoken up, trusted the adults who loved me. Sometimes courage isn't fighting back, it's telling the truth even when your voice shakes. I was 23 when I left Cleveland, though it felt like I'd aged a decade in the 2 years leading up to it. My boyfriend, ex-boyfriend now, was the first person I'd ever imagined building a real future with. We'd met at a friend's bonfire, the kind of night where the air smelled like smoke and cheap beer and you thought anything was possible. He had this way of making me laugh until my ribs hurt, and he made promises about forever that I wanted so badly to believe. For a while I did. Then came the distance, nights where he didn't come home, excuses that felt thinner each time. By the time he admitted there was someone else, I was already hollowed out. It wasn't just losing him, it was losing the life I thought we were building. Suddenly Cleveland was filled with ghosts. Our favorite coffee shop, the bookstore where he bought me that copy of Slaughterhouse-Five. Even our couch felt like a gravestone for something dead. So I packed what little I had into my Honda Civic, 2 duffel bags of clothes, a box of books, and my laptop, and I drove. I didn't have a plan, I just needed to get out. I ended up outside Pittsburgh, in a little town whose name I'd never even noticed on highway signs before. The only place I could afford was a 1-story rental house built sometime in the 70s. The landlord, a chain-smoking old man, showed me around with all the enthusiasm of someone pointing out stains on a shirt. "It's old, drafty. Don't expect much," he said, his voice gravelly. The walls were paneled in fake wood, the carpet threadbare. The kitchen linoleum curled at the edges like it was trying to escape. But the rent was low, and I told myself solitude was what I needed. Healing couldn't happen in a place full of memories. The first week passed quietly enough. I worked remote, editing manuscripts for a publishing client, sipping tea in the afternoons and calling my mom at night. "I'm fine," I told her, just figuring myself out again. It wasn't the truth, but it was close enough. But the house itself felt unsettled. The radiators hissed like whispers. The floors creaked as though someone was pacing just out of sight. The air turned bitterly cold after midnight, no matter how high I turned the thermostat. "Old houses talk," I muttered to myself more than once, trying to laugh it off. But by the second week, I wasn't laughing anymore. It started with footsteps. It was past 2 in the morning when I woke to the sound. Not random creaks this time. Actual footsteps. Slow. Measured. They moved up the hallway, stopped just beyond my locked bedroom door, and then a faint knock tapped against the wood. My heart raced so fast I thought I'd pass out. "Answer." The footsteps retreated. "Who's there?" I whispered, my voice breaking. No, I stayed awake until dawn, clutching my phone like a lifeline. When the morning came, nothing was disturbed. The door was still locked. I tried to convince myself it was a dream, until I walked into the kitchen. The knife I'd left drying on the counter the night before was stabbed upright into the hardwood floor. Not fallen, stabbed. I stared at it, my throat dry, before yanking it free and shoving it into a drawer. My hands shook for an hour. Later, I called my best friend Melissa. I tried to make it sound like a joke. Haunted, or I'm officially losing it. Either this place is... She chuckled nervously. If you hear voices telling you to get out, maybe listen. I tried to laugh too, but my voice cracked when I said, I don't think I'm alone here, Mel. That night, I heated leftovers in the microwave. As I leaned on the counter, I glanced at the glass door and froze. For a split second, I saw a tall, dark figure behind me, its shoulders too broad, its head tilted unnaturally to the side. I spun around, heart hammering. The kitchen was empty. I slammed the microwave shut and ran upstairs, refusing to look at the reflections in the dark windows. By the third week, sleep was impossible. I barricaded my bedroom door with a chair. Melissa started leaving FaceTime on with me late at night, the glow of her apartment behind her as she did homework or folded laundry. Her voice was a tether to something normal. But even that didn't help the night I woke at 3:13 a.m. At first, I thought the sound was part of a dream. But then I realized it was breathing. Not mine. Deep, steady breaths just behind me. A whisper brushed my ear. So close I felt the air move. "Rachel!" I screamed. The sound tore through my throat as I scrambled for my phone, flashlight beam cutting across the room. Nothing. No one. The shadows on the wall stretched unnaturally, crawling upward like vines. I didn't sleep again that night. The next day, desperate, I bought 2 cheap security cameras from Walmart. I set one in my bedroom, the other in the living room. I told myself that if I had proof, if I saw something, then maybe I could explain it away, or at least know I wasn't losing my mind. That night, I lay in bed with the cameras recording. Hours passed. I drifted into shallow, restless sleep. The next morning, I forced myself to watch the footage. The first 2 hours showed nothing but me tossing under the blankets. Then at 3 a.m., the bedroom feed flickered. A shadow appeared in the corner, taller than the door frame. Still, it stood there for a full minute, unmoving. Then its head snapped toward the lens. The feed glitched into static. I slammed the laptop shut, bile rising in my throat. The 4th week was hell. The knocks came again, louder, harder. The chair bracing my door rattled as though something was slamming into it. I sat on the bed with my hands clamped over my ears, whispering prayers I hadn't said since I was a child. Then came the worst. It was a Wednesday night, bone cold outside. I had left the lights on in every room, desperate for comfort. Sometime past 2 a.m., the knocking started again. Then a scraping sound, like nails dragging along the wood. I grabbed my phone and called Melissa. She answered groggily. "Rach, what's wrong?" "It's here," I whispered, tears burning my eyes. The chair against the door skidded across the floor as though shoved by something unseen. The door rattled violently. I screamed, fumbling for my keys. I shoved the chair aside, yanked the door open, and bolted into the hallway. I didn't make it to the front door before something hit me, hard. Invisible hands slammed into my back, knocking me to the ground. I clawed at the carpet, my scream raw as something dragged me backward. My nails tore against the fibers, leaving streaks. At the last second, I tore free. I scrambled to my feet, barefoot, and sprinted out the front door into the freezing night air. I didn't stop running until I was in my car, engine roaring, my breath clouding the windshield. I never went back. The next day, I called the landlord and told him I was breaking the lease. He didn't even sound surprised, just sighed and said, "Keys in the mailbox." That was it. No argument, no attempt to keep me. Like he'd heard this before. I shoved my belongings into garbage bags, barely looking at what I took. Clothes, books, laptop. I left furniture, dishes, everything else. The house could keep it. I found a bright apartment across town with big windows and neighbors close enough that I could hear their TVs at night. For weeks, I told myself it was over, that whatever lived in that rental couldn't follow me. But sometimes, just past 3 in the morning, I wake to the sound of 3 knocks against my bedroom door. I check the cameras on my phone, and every so often the feed glitches. The corner of the room is darker than it should be, as though something waits there, patient, watching. Pain makes us run from one darkness into another if we're not careful. I thought moving into that cheap house would heal me, but I ignored the warning signs. The landlord's indifference, the way the house itself seemed to breathe. Sometimes the places we choose in our desperation reflect our brokenness back at us. The lesson I carry now is simple. Trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, whether it's a person, a place, or even a silence, listen to it. Ignoring that voice might cost you more than just peace of mind.